I have been watching people talking about the Mandela Effect for much of this year now, and looking at every video on YouTube on the Mandela Effect and quantum effects and so on. And I find people going in two directions. Either, one, the dark side, fear. That is, this is the work of the Antichrist, and we have to be very afraid and very cautious. Planet Nibiru is about to show up in the solar system and wipe everybody out. The government's corrupt, and it wants to put us all in FEMA camps and make slaves out of us. They all have the same theme. The theme is that there is some kind of corruption, some mysterious dark power, and it's manipulating this world. The other side is those who are noticing their bodies work better, their scars are disappearing, they had a back injury that they don't have anymore, that someone who was dead is alive again, and they can, see one more movie from them, or if it's a friend, talk to them. An increasing number of people are saying this is the most amazing thing to ever happen. I'm telling you, this is the most amazing thing to have happened in your world so far. Perhaps not ever, but so far. People are fighting it. They're fighting it because they can't control it. But you could be struck by lightning tomorrow. You could fall and break your arm or your leg. You could bump your head and never be able to speak again. You don't control anything in your life. You've never had control. Control's not part of the existence. The reason there is, if there is a dark group controlling this world, is because they're afraid and trying to make more control. They're afraid of, some ancient gods coming back or some catastrophe happening. Control doesn't exist, and the obsession with control is very destructive. It's important, though, that to notice that people are seeing a lot more. And so, seeing more, they assume there's more. We see the Ariadne Grande, the big spider attack in Manchester. We see the fake attack in the disco in the US. And many people are saying, look, that's fake, that's so obviously fake. We see the International Space Station and say, that looks fake. It looks like they're faking it. Why would they do that? Why are there bubbles in space? We see the CERN thing, and I heard someone say just this last night, I've never seen any evidence that this giant thing underground was built. They just tell us it was. They've never shown us pictures from this. I've never seen any evidence that this is going on. Maybe it is. I'm not saying it's not, but I haven't seen any evidence. We're seeing these sort of government attacks that we've seen since at least Kennedy, probably much earlier, made to control people, made to keep them afraid. And people are beginning to notice this and ask questions. But what's changed is not that there are more attacks, not that there are more things to be afraid of, it's that there are more people noticing. And because people are kind of selfish, they think they've always paid attention, and if they're noticing more, there must be more. And to counter that, I encourage you, if you've never done this, to buy a new car, even a used car. And you'll suddenly start seeing hundreds of that car on the road, and you've never noticed it before. When something comes into our awareness, we notice a lot more of it. And this is what's happening. People are noticing more. They're becoming more aware. And secondarily, that more dark, more manipulative types who've been manipulating the world for a very long time, they're becoming clumsy and making stupid mistakes. I talked about that in another recording recently. So, with these people becoming more clumsy, and it's easier to see, it looks like a clown show sometimes, and with people waking up finally, getting out of bed and looking around, they're seeing more danger in the world, but there isn't more danger. Again, the ME is not the changes happening in the world, because changes have always been happening. For more than 1 million years, changes have been happening. The ME, the Mandela Effect, is people starting to notice the changes. Now, I want to suggest to you, I've told you this is the most exciting thing to ever happen in your world. And I'll go a little further and say that within a few years, war will be a thing that humans won't be able to consider. Violence against another sentient being will be outrageous. There'll be a greater harmony with animals and nature. Humans are taking a phylogenetic, evolutionary, and meta-intuitive leap to a whole new stage of humanity, a whole new level, and it's happening right now. And so when you look around out there and you see bad things happening, and you decide to be afraid, make a different choice. Start looking at the amazing changes that are happening. Things are getting better every second, every day. And we who are on the inside, who have been watching this shift for a very long time, preparing for it and then nudging it along, many of us have been surprised. Because of the Mandela Effect, things are happening even faster and changing people more deeply than many expected. For example, and you can't argue with my stats here, because this is a Mandela Effect. This is just what I remember. But when I was in university, I lived with a young man who was a cross-dresser. He used to dress up as a woman and go out dancing. And he was always scared of being beaten up or killed. And at this time, nearly 100% of people in the U.S. opposed cross-dressing. I know, J. Edgar Hoover did it, lots of people did it, but nearly everybody considered it horrifying that a man would dress as a woman. And nearly 100% of people opposed any rights being given to homosexuals. As far as I'm concerned, people are people. Who you love's up to you, how you dress is up to you. These aren't things to oppose. And my memory says that when I was in university 30 years ago, that nearly 100% of the country I lived in was opposed to these things, and I couldn't understand this. Just as a little sidestep, I'll remind you that 200 years before that, nearly 100% of people were opposed to women dressing as men. That if a woman dressed as a man, she could be beaten or killed. And now we have the same attitude towards men dressing as women. Cross-dressers, transsexuals. Even the word for it, transvestite, comes from transvestiti, dressing across. But this word shares roots from the Latin with travesty. It's just horrifying to people. But just as society managed to survive women dressing as men, we didn't all die a horrible death, God didn't strike us down. Women going to work in men's jobs, what a horrifying thought. Well, no, it's an obvious thing. We shouldn't object to a man going to work in a skirt and makeup if that's what he wants to do. It's perfectly reasonable. So I went back and looked at graphs showing the acceptance of gay marriage, of cross-dressing, and so on. And I found that, again, in the United States, because that's where I grew up and that's the one I know, that back when I was in university, and basically 100% of people oppose it, historical graphs actually show that now maybe 30% of people supported it. And now it's up to over 50% of people support these things and say, look, people can dress how they want. Right? So you can't trust your graphs. And the reason that I point this out, you can't trust your graphs, is because the Mandela Effect is happening. You say, well, it's only grown, just a few percent over the last 10 years. People are slow to change. People are stupid. People are unkind. Well, I tell you that from the first of the timelines, the one I grew up in, the darkest one, things have changed an immense amount. And it's not just this one, which I happen to find graphs for. Hurricanes, tidal waves, tornadoes are less than they've ever been, less destructive, less common, smaller. The world's becoming a safer place to live. And you can look back and say, look at the history, the graphs across time. You can't trust them. Because we're changing, we're skipping timelines, we're moving to a better world. Cancer deaths are at an all-time low. People all over the world are waking up. I just showed you the photo of the man giving the gorilla a hug, a wild gorilla that could kill him, because the gorilla was sad because a poacher had shot its mother, and the man felt empathy for the animal and sat down with him and held him while he grieved. Right? People are waking up. You've seen so many pictures or videos on 9gag and other places of people doing things you wouldn't believe. Just a few years ago, they wouldn't have done these things, where people are acting in these beautiful and amazing ways. And yeah, if you read the newspaper, do newspapers exist anymore? If you watch the news, it's all full of fake attacks and terrorists and violence and horror. But that's all a clown show. No people are dying in these things. The world is getting safer than it's ever been. The number of wars is at an all-time low. People are questioning the lies and beginning to notice things. Reference what I said earlier about that. When I was in graduate school or a little after, somebody came up with the idea of global warming and said the North Polar Cap was going to melt and all of Florida would be underwater. And now the North Polar Cap is gone. And Florida's as obnoxious as it ever was. Disneyland and old people. Swamps and mosquitoes. The cap's gone. The thing that everybody's been terrified of for so long is gone. This whole panic thing, it's no longer part of the world. For those who don't know, the South Pole and Greenland, their ice cap is getting thinner. And if you want to trace that, again, you can't do it with historical graphs because we're jumping timelines. Your historical graph will only be the current timeline. But get yourself something like Google Earth and go mouse over all of the places in Google Earth and get an idea how thick the ice sheet is. And then come back a week later and do it again, and a week later and do it again. And over time you'll notice you will see what I've seen, that there are more and more mountains sticking up through the snow. Because the ice sheet is getting thinner. This thing that's kept us so frightened is disappearing. These changes, they go back a long way into history. I heard somebody last night talking about the horrors of the Spanish Inquisition. How many people were tortured to death and such. Now, as a meta, I've studied historical pieces that tie to the meta workings, the meta-intuitive stuff. And I know that at one point over 1 million people were tortured to death and their property stolen over 300 years. And if you look at Wiki today, it will tell you between 3,000 and 5,000 people were indicted by the Inquisition. And of those, a smaller number was tried. Very few people. The number goes from 1 million down to 5,000. That this has become less violent. Now, again, you may have trouble seeing this, so I encourage you to do the research yourself. Memorize how many people Stalin's purges killed. Memorize how many people died in World War I or World War II. Memorize how many people died in Nazi concentration camps. And what you'll find is that these shifts are happening across time, and those numbers are falling. It's not something you can see in history. You've got to memorize the number and then start watching it. But what you'll see is the violence in the past of this world is decreasing. And if it keeps going, we will get to a place where World War II didn't happen. It just never happened. They talked it out. And then World War I will disappear. It will never have happened. You'll remember it. And if you want to know about it, I encourage you to study it and learn about it, because it's different. Given the different geography of Europe, the whole layout of World War II is different. I encourage you to start studying it, but you can't write things down or take pictures, because those will change. Any physical media will change as you jump timelines. You need to look at something, pick any area, 2 or 3 areas, and memorize some stats from it. And what you'll find is what I saw with the Spanish Inquisition. It went from 1 million people down to 5,000. And I'm not a historian, I don't care about the details. I care about the trends. And so there may be people out there saying it's 15,000. But the point is, not that long ago, it was 1 million. Those people who've been formally working to keep everybody afraid, the news that's been carrying stories of mad cow disease, mad pig disease, mad pigeon disease, all these things that are going to wipe out humanity, they're beginning to look silly. We're just not impressed. Mad cow disease that was going to kill everybody, it came and it went, and nobody died. People die all the time. Sure, some people died, but the numbers didn't substantially increase. It wasn't a plague. It didn't wipe out the world. These huge things we're scared of, and the people who are spreading the rumors of these huge things, they're starting to look clumsy and silly, and people are waking up and starting to question them. All of these, and many, many more, are signs that your world is getting better. Every second of every day, your world's getting better. And yet maybe you're seeing more of the dark stuff, but that's only because it's becoming more obvious and you're waking up. I saw 2 different videos last night of people saying, I want this Mandela effect to end and I want the old world back. And these are people not paying attention. They don't realize how much improved their body is, how much improved the world is, how many things have changed. But they want what's familiar back. They're like a wild animal being drugged from their cage and told you can go free if you want to. That runs back in the cage because all it's ever known has been being chained up and paraded around at a circus. These people, they're not bad people. They're just like, imagine it when you were in grade school and your parent comes in and says, wake up, you have to get ready for school, and you pull the covers over your head and say, no, I was having a good dream. I don't want to go to school today. These people are like that. They're kids looking out at a beautiful new world, and all they can see is the bedroom they live in. They can't see the beautiful new world. It's cold out there, or it's hot out there, or whatever. I don't want to go. I want to stay in bed. Everyone's being called to wake up now. And the people who are fighting it, not bad people, just, little kids who want to stay asleep. As this is happening, you need to choose joy. You need to find the beauty and not get focused on Nibiru or the Antichrist or finding 666 in every logo. This kind of nonsense is going to hurt you in the long run. Holding on to fear, you will create more ugliness in your life. When you stop focusing all your energy on trying to find 666 in every logo of every product out there to prove that the Antichrist is here to destroy you, you're going to find that you're happier. And being happier, you will hold a healthier energy in your system, and you will draw better and better things into your life, and amazing things will happen. You must begin to focus on joy and not fear. Now, I want to suggest to you that the Mandela Effect is provoking your anxiety on purpose. Then you say, that ain't right. It's supposed to be making the world better. It's doing it on purpose. Because if you come up with fear, if you panic, if you create anger, hatred, self-loathing, violence and abuse towards others, then this Mandela Effect can focus on that and start going back and removing those pieces from your life. So moving forward, you won't have fear. And if you respond with joy, it can start bringing you more and more of the good stuff. But the only way it can do that is to provoke that fear on purpose. And so it is doing so not because it's unkind, but because it's kind. The world has taught you from the time you were a child to be scared. Your parents taught you to be scared of going in the street because you'd be run over by a car. Everybody's taught you not to talk to strangers. I tell you, the most interesting people I've met in my lifetime, they were once strangers. I know that's hard to believe, but all of the coolest people I've known were once strangers. You should talk to strangers. Yes, you should do it with discernment, awareness, but you should be talking to strangers. You should be crossing the street. I'm willing to bet. Now, anyone who wants can take me up on this bet, and we'll talk about details. But I'm willing to bet that if you look around the entire world, some of the greatest wonders, I'd even go so far as to say most of the greatest wonders, the most beautiful places, aren't on your block. Which means you'll never get there if you don't cross the street. Yeah? And so these things you were taught as a child to be afraid, to be angry, to try and control, they're not your friends. And this sort of training has gone on as you've grown up. You've learned about nuclear war destroying the world, and now we see a guy eating nuclear waste, licking it off his palms, who did this for, 30 years and lived to be 70, because nuclear waste isn't the horrible crime we thought it was. Now, I don't know about that. I studied nuclear engineering in university, but only for one semester. Found it immensely boring and quit. But I'm sure that those who have studied it will come out and tell us more about it. I was taught as a child, once a week, we would all be told to hide under our desk while an alarm was going off, because somehow hiding under our desk was going to save us from a nuclear blast. Right? If a nuclear blast were to happen, how that works, I don't know. But hiding under a desk wouldn't make any difference. What they were doing is teaching children to be afraid. And you, in whatever system you've grown up in, you have learned to be afraid. And that fear leads to self-loathing. It leads to suicide or depression. It leads to anger, abuse towards others, abuse of the environment, abuse of self. That fear, that anger, it leads you into all kinds of things that the world's better without, and will soon be without. Your society has taught you to see yourself as a slave, and to believe everything that the news tells you, and to jump up and panic whenever they tell you to jump up and panic. What I want to suggest to you is that this has become what's called habituated. It's a habit. Right? Imagine you're a psychiatrist running rats through a maze, and every time the rat turns right at this corner, you shock it, and the rat learns to be afraid of that corner and not go that way. The sort of B.F. Skinner approach to humans as a mechanical system. It is part of you, the mechanical system. Life has done this to you. It's taught you to be afraid. It's made it a habit. And in my decades of travel on this earth and talking to spiritual teachers and gurus from every source I can find, I've only found a single way to replace habits, and it's not hypnosis. The only way I know to replace a bad habit, something that's become habituated, is to replace it with a better habit. It's the only one I know, and I've taught it to many people. And so this is what the ME is doing. It's taking all of these old habits of fear, of the idea of yourself as the helpless slave. No, you don't control your life. It will end when it's time to end. But you're not a slave. You can take a new job if you don't like your old one. You can find a new relationship if you're tired of your old one. You can wear different clothes or fix your hair a different way. You can move to a different country. You can get a job on a cruise ship or become a deep sea diver. You probably can't become an astronaut for reasons lots of people are making videos about, but mostly anything you want, you can at least start working towards it. And most of those things you can achieve. But you can't do it if you're afraid. You can't do it if you don't cross the streets. So what the Mandela Effect is doing for you, gently and kindly and with great love, is causing you to face your old habits of being afraid of everything, and to offer you the chance to make a better choice. I heard someone this week who meant well saying that his partner called him and said, I watched the Chick-fil-A sign change. I don't know how old the video was. He may not have recorded this week. This week I saw it. I watched the Chick-fil-A sign change right in front of me. And me, simple, naive creature that I am, I said, that's cool. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see some change right in front of me. I heard a girl last night saying, I was driving down here and I was afraid of all these people, and I saw a driveway with a factory or something. She said, gosh, if something happened to my car, that's the only driveway I could pull into. And then she looked at the road and she looked back and she said that driveway was gone. It was just grass. Just right in front of her eyes. Again, if it were me, naive as I am, I'd think, wow, that's cool, watching these changes happen. Her response was, oh my God, it's the Antichrist. It's demon computers doing AI to mess us up, and we'll have to find a way to conquer this and defeat it and destroy it. And I appreciate that she's a good kid, but she needs to get out of bed. She needs to stop pulling the covers over her head. And you do as well. You need to get out of bed. Start looking at the world. Realize that your body is healthier than it's ever been. And if you don't see it in your own life, you will. Because bodies have changed immensely. Look at some of the YouTube videos on this, the changes in the body. And these will continue. People are growing healthier. They will, in a few years, live to 200 years old. And this won't be strange. You won't be going senile at 60. You won't have all your hair fall out or get cellulite at 30 or 40. People will live longer and be healthier. And it's wonderful and it's amazing and it's the most beautiful time in the history of humanity happening right now. And it's a time to be awake, and it's a time to stop pulling the covers over your head and to get out of bed and to go outside and look at the new colors showing up that have never been there. And yeah, maybe somebody's spraying chemtrails in the air, but you can't do anything about that. Unless you want to, buy surface-to-air missiles and try shooting them down, but you may end up shooting down a passenger airliner, so I discourage this sort of violence. Instead, realize my liver's more than twice the size it used to be. So these chemicals that might have affected me in the past, my body can handle it. My kidneys are stronger than they've ever been. My system has changed. Don't find the things to be afraid of, even if they're there. Find the things to celebrate. And in focusing on those, in finding joy, you will draw more and more of the amazing into your life. And this process from where we are to where humanity's going to be will be smooth and amazing, and you'll have wonderful experiences. Right? Or focus on the ugly stuff, and this process will be one of ongoing pain and anxiety and struggle. And until that happens, until that final stage is reached, this Mandela Effect, these changes, they will continue to provoke you. They will continue to take the things you know and challenge them. And the more that you study the Mandela Effect, the more familiar you get with it, the bigger changes you can face. So right now, maybe you are fascinated by the Mandela Effect of Febreze, or Mickey's suspenders, or Winona Ryder spelling her name differently. But as you study it more and become more comfortable and wake up and pay attention, you're going to find more and more. A new neighborhood in your town, an island that wasn't there before, a driveway disappearing the moment you look away from it, a Chick-fil-A sign changing in front of your eyes. And a lot of these effects, they flop back and forth. It's one way one day, and 2 days later it's the other, and then it goes back. And nobody seems to remember. They're only talking about the latest flop, and they're totally missing all the flips before it. Right? The more you pay attention, the more you will notice. It's, a law of life. It's not magic. So the more you pay attention to the Mandela Effect, the more you'll notice. And the more that you notice, you will begin to realize that in every instant you're being offered a choice to be afraid, or a choice to find beauty and joy, harmony, community, curiosity, celebration, all the wonderful things, the things that make it worthwhile to take and to live a lifetime as a human being. Right? You came here for a reason, and the reason is this change. Don't spend this sacred and beautiful and unbelievable and incomprehensible and amazing time constantly trying to create more fear. Instead, start using this time to build your awareness, to become curious, to become alive, to communicate this to others. And when people say you're an idiot, well, stop hanging out with them. Find people who say you're beautiful and you're wonderful. They're the kind of people you want to be hanging out with. Build new communities. Get out of bed. Cross the road. Talk to a few strangers. And in that experience, yes, of course, use discernment, blah, blah. If you're 6, don't cross the road. You shouldn't be listening to this. This is for grown-ups. The rest of you, cross the road. Go see some of the wonders of your world. They're not in your hometown. Yeah? Get out there. Experience the beauty. Notice. Feel the joy. Find it. When you can't feel it, when you're having a miserable day because everything's hurting in your body, say, I'll bet this is another one of those Mandela Effect changes and my body's being upgraded. I've spent my life driving a Yugo, and now I'm going to be driving a Ferrari. But not one of those Italian Ferraris that are always breaking down and high maintenance. This is going to be, one of the Flying Jetsons cars. Right? When you're feeling pain, notice that. My body's being upgraded. This is a chance to celebrate. And the more that you practice joy, the more it will become a habit. And the more that you do the habit of joy, the habit of fear and anger and all the ugliness that comes from fear, the dark side, the things that lead you to believe that you're a slave, the more those things will just become impossible for you. Quit choosing those things, right? You've gotten good at being scared, at being a slave, at being angry, at feeling helpless. You've gotten good at those things. The things you're good at, just quit practicing. Start practicing the new and different ones. Start practicing finding and celebrating the beauty, waking up the joy, learning to smile. Really feel, notice that every human being on the planet has become an empath. And that they're all feeling. And notice not that this means you're feeling a little more emotion right now, but what that will mean in 10 or 20 years. When everyone is comfortably empathic, children won't be able to bully one another because it'll hurt them. People won't be able to hurt one another because it will hurt them. And violent crime will stop. And war will stop. And spousal abuse will stop. And all of the ugliness and the separation and the violence, it'll disappear. It will no longer exist in your world. I do not speak as an optimist. I'm not an optimist. I am a spiritual master, one of a group of them that has come to your world. I speak as one who can perceive the probabilities, can do the math in 6 or 8 dimensions, can tell you this is what's happening and this is where it's going, and you don't get a choice. You're going to have to live in a better world, or you're going to have to die and pick your next life in a horrible place. You don't get a choice. If you live here, you're going to live in a better world. And there are going to be rainbow trees and rainbow mountains and unicorns and new animals you never heard of, and, raccoon dogs and people giving hugs to gorillas and all kinds of crazy, wonderful, formerly impossible things. You're going to be surrounded by them every second of your life. And if amidst that you choose to be a grumpy old man, a bitter old woman, hey, that's your choice. But you're going to be miserable. When everybody around you is full of joy and they see you being miserable, say, I don't want to hang out with you. You're going to be alone and frustrated, unhappy. Don't go that way. Go the way of community, talking to strangers, of curiosity, coming out from under the covers and looking out your window, or maybe even going outside. Right? Smell the trees and notice there are new smells. Look at the trees and notice there are new colors. Go for a walk in the city. Eat your favorite food, drink your favorite drink, and notice that there's new richness and subtlety in those things, because the humans can taste more than they could before, and because there are new flavors and smells and colors that are appearing as your world is becoming more complex and more beautiful. This is the time the Hopi spoke of. This is the time that my own heritage, the Blackfoot, the Crow, spoke of. This is a time that the Mayan calendar spoke of. This is the end time. This is the apocalypse, the revelation. This is the time when all of the old, the ugly, the shadow is being removed, being wiped out. And people are becoming younger and healthier and happier. And life is becoming more beautiful. Quit obsessing about the old. Quit choosing fear. Quit practicing being a slave. Choose joy and all the wonderful things that come from it. And practice being free and powerful and able to call things into your life and to create the life that until now you've only dreamed of. Replace this old habit with a better habit through a lot of little steps, a lot of little choosings. And make those choosings of joy. And notice how your whole world starts to shift. How people all over suddenly want to talk to you. How you become more popular, more beautiful, more fascinating. How everything is just groovier than it's ever been. Make this choice, this new choice. Make the choice to joy right now and continue to make it all day. And when you're feeling tired or sad, when you're exhausted because Mandela's changing your body, when you have physical pain because, you're letting go old habits or old damage, when something shifts right before your eyes and you have a choice to be afraid or to talk about Antichrist or 666 or CERN or AI demons or the planet Nibiru or whatever bullshit story you've created to keep yourself enslaved, to keep yourself a child of fear. Let that go and face the new thing. And face the change in your body, the change in the world, the change in the people you've known. Yeah, they're different. I don't recognize my husband because he doesn't tell the story he used to tell. Big deal. He also doesn't get angry and shout at you as much as he used to. He's also better with the dog or the kid or whatever. Celebrate the changes he's making or she's making as you're celebrating the changes you yourself are making. Face all these changes with joy. Be like a child approaching, a park for the first time. Look under every rock and poke at the bugs. Take the pretty ones back to your mom or your friends and say, look at this pretty rock. Don't be like a child on the first day of school, crying, wishing your mommy was there and terrified of everything your teacher's going to show you. Yeah? Be like a university student on the first day at university, when it's a little scary and intimidating and all these new things, but your parents aren't there to tell you what to do anymore. You can get drunk. Your folks won't even find out. You can, don't tell anybody, you can have sex. You can go to a party. You can study any subject at the university. Be like that, like a teenager going to university for the first time and getting away from the control of the parents. Be like a child in a park, not like a child on the first day of school. Choose the joy and not the fear and watch your life improve.